Welcome to See Beneath Your Beautiful, where guests share stories of adversity and perseverance, which inspire, encourage, and challenge us. We embrace these tough conversations, intimately exploring our loves, fears, and hopes with a delicious combination of depth and lightness.
I'm Lerria Schuh. I am a mom and a wife, a mom to 3 now college kids. So no more little people in my house, but it's fun to see the kids blossoming and growing. I'm a wife, and I'm currently the executive director for the Smith Barbieri Progressive Fund. I've been doing that for a couple of years, following a career of over 20 years in the entertainment business.
What's the Progressive Fund?
The Progressive Fund is a charitable foundation. The funds come from Sharon Smith and Don Barbieri, who have dedicated their lives to helping other people. And the Progressive Fund is both advocacy and granting. So in addition to helping out small nonprofits and organizations that typically don't have large development funds or things like that, we're here to help them out. And we advocate for marginalized persons with progressive values at the base of everything we do.
How do you feel about all your kids being out of the house?
It's mixed. I was very, very sad when it first happened, and I didn't think that I would enjoy it at all. I do have to say there are times when I enjoy it, the peace and the quiet and the clean house that I can have with no kids. I think that also comes with the fact that all of them are doing so well and are so happy.
Yeah.
There's a saying that you're only as happy as your least happy child. And I think that that's really true. And I'm fortunate that my kids are all healthy and they're happy and they're doing well. So that kind of allows me to do my own thing. And that's not so bad.
Yeah. We were just talking about that this morning because my daughters are 22 and 26. And the older one got married and moved to Canada. And the youngest one is now living with my sister in Boston. And this podcast room is her bedroom. But we were just talking yesterday about getting rid of the bed. I feel guilt, but also don't want to feel any guilt about being ready for this part of my life.
Yeah.
They're off doing their own thing, and I don't need a whole room that is an ode to them.
That's right.
Are your kids' rooms still their rooms?
Yes and no. They each have a place to come home to sleep. They have their own rooms. One of them is pretty much completely a guest room. I mean, there's very little of her personal belongings left. That's my youngest. My oldest room is also a guest room, but still has quite a bit of her stuff because she lives in a small apartment currently. Mm-hmm. And my son's room has a bed, but I also call it the art room because 3/4 of it, other than his bed, really everything else is set up with art tables and all my supplies and everything like that. So I've kind of taken over that room. So
that makes me feel better.
Yeah.
That makes me feel a lot better, actually. Thanks for saying all that.
Yeah.
What kind of art are you doing?
I'm a wannabe artist. I have always enjoyed art.
If you are making art, you're an artist. I think you should claim it and not shy away from saying you are an artist.
Oh, well, thank you. I do some painting. Mm-hmm. I like to do detail work, but I'm not a good detailed painter. So my paintings are more simple and basic. Love to do the detailed coloring. Mm-hmm. Love to do that. My oldest daughter in particular is super talented with watercolors. We've got some watercolor supplies. But my next project is I'm going to redecorate the inside of some dollhouses that my father made. He made these 3-story wooden dollhouses that are incredible. He made one for me when I was 5, and he made one for my youngest daughter. And the wallpaper's coming down from the one when I was 5. And I've done a little bit of research, and there's so much great dollhouse print size wallpaper and things like that, and flooring. That's going to be my next thing. Is I'm going to dive in and see how I do with that.
That makes me so happy. My mom used to have a dollhouse, and she totally decorated it with wallpaper, and even the little switches turned the lights on and off.
Yes.
You are not a wannabe. Take that out of there.
I should. I will.
Because you're making art. You're an artist.
Yes.
And especially if it's bringing you joy, because that, I think, is the whole point.
It is. It is. And that's definitely why I do it. During COVID, I haven't so much, but I'm a arts and healing volunteer at Sacred Heart. And
Oh,
it's
cool.
been hard because meeting with patients is difficult. And I work with pediatric oncology and did all kinds of art projects with them. And I loved it. And I will go back to doing it when things are a little bit less worrisome in terms of germs and that sort of thing. But I always told the kids that I would work with that they didn't have to worry about making a mess because undoubtedly I was going to make a bigger mess than they would each time I went. And that was indeed the case. I have this crazy dream. Maybe it's not so crazy, but it's becoming more and more of a dream of artists like myself who we don't sell our work. We just create it because of the joy. But some of it's not, I'll say it's not so bad to look at. It's not terrible stuff. But what do you do with all of that? Especially if, for me, I don't have a goal of trying to sell it. But then I think about folks who have been homeless and are getting into housing for the first time. And they get a lot of support for beds and bedding and bath towels, kitchen items, all the things that somebody should have as a priority to move into a home. But the things that make a home are, art on the walls and the handcrafted Afghan on the couch. And I've been thinking, wouldn't it be great if I could get artists together like me?
Like me.
Yeah, who like to create art, but don't really have anything to do with it when it's done. And what if we were to work with a nonprofit who helps get folks housed who could say, yes, we'd like your art. And then they have a little room where newly housed people can go in and be like, oh, I like that painting of a flower, or I love this shoebox that's been Mod Podged and looks so gorgeous,
Yeah.
or an Afghan or a quilt or whatever. And with the artists just donating, because nonprofits don't have money to buy things like art. But I thought, wouldn't that be fun? And wouldn't it help people who are newly housed to feel like they have a home that's beginning to be their own?
I'm totally into that. I love it. I would donate it.
And I think there's a lot of artists out there who might also be inspired to create more.
Yeah.
I've talked to my daughter about that. She's so talented and it can be a little bit expensive. So I've said, well, what if I bought the supplies and you created it and we found somewhere to donate it just so you can keep creating because of the joy. But if you have a reason to create, maybe you'll create more often and maybe I'll create more often.
I really love that. December 30th, I got COVID. And today is the first day in 3 weeks that I sound okay. And I don't feel like falling asleep this minute. But I am a little slow thinker. So sorry.
It's okay.
But also, I'm just a slow thinker. I'm just using COVID as an excuse.
I'm glad you're starting to feel better.
Yeah, I am. I used to play Boggle. Do you know Boggle?
Uh-huh.
I used to play it all the time with my girlfriend. And then at one point, I just was too slow. Like I couldn't think fast enough.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember when I was younger, I owned a studio downtown Coeur d'Alene. And I used to have this tech guy come in. And I remember thinking, he's probably in his 40s. I was probably in my 20s. And he's such a slow thinker. And then, of course, whatever you don't like about somebody else happens to you. And so I've become him. Speaking of that, did you have a brain injury or what? What is your story?
Yes. So I got a traumatic brain injury, 8.5 years ago, summer of 2013. And a story like millions of people, literally, where a household accident, I was on my porch having dinner with my husband and he had taken the plates inside. And on one side of the porch, we have a railing about 6 feet above a sidewalk below. And there was a vine of some type growing up the railing. And I reached over the railing to unloosen the vine because it should have been on a string that was going up to the roof, not the railing. And the railing let go and I went head over heels and fell on the sidewalk below.
Oh, man.
And initially, my concern was my shoulder, my elbow. I had a huge hematoma on my leg immediately. And I felt funny in my head. I couldn't put it into words. So I just kept saying, I'm fine. And the short side of the story is that I ended up with a concussion. Didn't go to urgent care until the next day. It was 1 week before a 2-week scheduled vacation. So I took that week off of work. And then I had 2 subsequent weeks with some mellow vacation. But I knew something wasn't right that entire time. And when I went back to work, which would have been 3 weeks later, I could not concentrate on anything.
Mm.
It was unbelievable and a little frightening. So I went back to urgent care and they said, you need a specialist. And that began a road that went 5 years long before I truly found a specialist that could help me. And along the way, I saw 7 or 8 MDs and continued to hear, you're fine. A couple of them would say, oh gosh, you're so far off of the healing spectrum of where you should be. I just don't know what to tell you. It was amazing to me.
What did they think you had?
Well, post-concussion syndrome is something that's fairly common. And it's something that after concussions, if persons haven't healed within 6 weeks or something, they will diagnose you with post-concussion syndrome where you have a certain amount of symptoms that continue.
Mm-hmm.
Now, depending upon who you talk to, some will say it only lasts 3 months. Some will say after 6 months, you're healed as far as you will ever heal. And finding doctors that know what they're talking about is much more difficult than one would think.
What kind of specialist should you see?
I now have a little list of providers that have experience with head injury. So a lot of the sports medicine places have folks who specialize in head injury. There are neurologists who specialize in head injury. They're hard to get into. And you want head injury, not necessarily any neurologist. I ended up in the ER months after my original one because my symptoms had flared up so bad. And they recommended a neurologist who turned out to be a stroke neurologist.
Oh.
I waited months to get into this, that wasn't the right one. Neuropsychologists particularly usually have experience or interest in head injury. And between a chiropractor who led me to the neuropsychologist and the neuropsychologist were really the two people who helped me the most. And I have to back up a little bit because most people say a chiropractor, what the heck? I had never been to a chiropractor in my life. And I had a friend who kept telling me about 3 years into my head injury, you need to go see him. You need to go see him. No, chiropractor isn't for me, that sort of thing. And finally, I was so desperate, I went. And he does natural, innovative ways to help people. And he made me a promise on my first visit. And he said, we will get you better. And anything that I cannot do, I will find somebody who can. And that statement alone, I will never forget because it was the first hope I had had in about 3.5 years.
Yeah.
And it took some time because of insurance that wouldn't let me see this specialist or that specialist and him trying things that he thought would work. And eventually got to a neuropsychologist who really helped me understand how to manage the brain injury and was then able to get to specialists for vision therapy and different kinds of massage that would take care of the fact that my body was so stuck in flight or fright mode. It had been for years. There's some alternative type massage therapists combined with the vision therapy to try and get your nervous system basically to relax, to put it into simple terms.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a lot of what I had to do. I think it was 4 years in, I got to St. Luke's rehab and was doing work there for vestibular dysfunction, which is basically your sight, sound, and motion not connecting in your brain. Like you'll see something moving, but it takes a little while longer for your brain to recognize that. So the object is going by and your brain is not clicking at the same pace, if that makes sense. That's kind of a simple way to put it. And so I was by this time, probably 4.5 years in and had been struggling with vestibular dysfunction from my accident, all of those years, which was just making me sicker and sicker. And was in therapy there for probably 4 or 5 months. And I will always have vestibular dysfunction to some degree, but we were able to balance it out much better. And now I know certain things are going to bother me. Mm-hmm. So, for instance, my family does surfing behind boats in the summer, which causes the boat to turn pretty fast when they go pick up somebody's fallen off a surfboard or whatever. And I cannot do that. I can't do things that move fast. Yeah. I'll never go on another roller coaster. I haven't done biking, but I hope to this summer, and we'll see if I can do it.
What symptoms did you suffer from and what has been alleviated over time?
Concentration was a big one. I couldn't concentrate. The vestibular dysfunction came to me before I had the right terminology, as I couldn't watch TV. I couldn't listen to music that moved quickly. Bright lights from the very beginning and still today bother me. And now that I know how to manage it, if my brain is relaxed and I'm pacing well during the day, then I can do pretty much what I want to do, meaning I'm not in a place with bright lights. I avoid crowds. I keep things quiet. If I decide one night to go to dinner with friends and it's a noisy restaurant that's brightly lit and I don't have a hat on, then the next day my brain is going to be really tired and I'm going to think a lot slower and I'm going to be more sensitive to light and sound. I might have trouble reading for a longer period of time, so I have to take a lot of breaks. I went to a basketball game this fall and had a great time. I had my earplugs, I had my hat, I was like all ready to go and had a great time, but it took me down for a couple of days afterwards. I look normal, so you would never know, but I was so exhausted. And when I say exhausted, I mean neurofatigue exhausted, which is different than I'm tired exhausted.
Is that like COVID fatigue? Because I've had that. You just have to nap no matter what.
It sounds very similar. I mean, I haven't had COVID, but what I read often makes me think, gosh, these symptoms are so similar to a brain injury. When I'm neurofatigued, everything moves slow. It would be like if your legs were sore and you were trying to run and, moving your legs is so difficult. That's what the thought process is like.
I see.
I want to close my eyes and think it through. And sometimes things like direction are really, really difficult. A few months ago, we went on a weekend trip to the kids in college, and it was such a busy weekend, and we did so many things that when we left, my brain was so neurofatigued that the ride between here and Helena, which I've done hundreds of times, and Helena is where I grew up, about 45 minutes out of town, I couldn't recognize anything on the road. I had no idea where we were.
Wow.
And kept saying along the way, have we passed thus and such, and it was weird because I was aware of the fact that I didn't know where we were, but I couldn't directionally ever figure out where we were. So certain things like that pop in if my brain is too tired. Part of my injury included damage to one of my knees. That took 8 MDs in 7 years before somebody would MRI it, which is really frustrating. And when they did finally MRI it, they found a torn meniscus, a knee full of arthritis from lack of treatment. Long story short, 5 knee surgeries later, I've had both of my knees replaced. And some of that is probably from a lifetime of skiing prior to this injury and things like that too. But I have no doubt in my mind that original injury happened, with the fall. And so, I've had some other things to deal with along the way. But looking at my 9-year anniversary in July, I feel like I have a new lease on life.
Oh, that's exciting. Do you mind me asking how old you are?
Oh, I am 51.
I met you. It was a lot of years ago.
Yeah, it was post-injury. Everything in my life is pre or post-injury.
Yes, I understand that.
Post-injury. So I would say it was probably 6 years ago, 7 maybe.
Okay. Well, I do remember you talking about what it was like to mother with this injury.
Mm-hmm.
So do you want to talk about what that was like for you and what guilt you felt or how your kids felt about you?
Yeah, different phases for sure. In the beginning, I didn't want them to see me hurt. I didn't want them to know. We knew something was terribly wrong, but I looked normal, right? So when you look normal, it's hard for anybody, much less a child, to understand that something is wrong. I would set my alarm at 2:30 in the afternoon so I would be upright when they came in the door at 3. And I tried so hard to hide it from them. But then I had to miss things. For years, I missed every soccer game. And I was a mom who never missed anything. My husband and I were this great team and we did everything together and we did all the stuff for the kids. They were our whole world. And they were still my whole world, but suddenly I couldn't do anything. I couldn't go to choir concerts. I couldn't go to soccer games. I no longer was skiing with the family on Saturdays. And going to parent teacher conferences was difficult because I couldn't process what the teacher was saying fast enough. And I couldn't help on homework. And it was like, suddenly I felt like a non-parent. Mm-hmm. And that was really, really difficult. And that went on for years and years and years. My oldest daughter was a junior in high school, I think, when this happened. And I look back and think she didn't have the mothering she needed her junior and senior year in high school. And that will always make me feel terrible. I know I did the best that I could at the time, but it will still make me feel bad because I wanted to be so much more than I was physically and mentally, emotionally able to do. Mm-hmm. And as I got better and I learned how to manage my injury and had some help, we were able to talk about it more. And I hope that they take the strength that I've had to instill in myself to get through. I hope that they see that. And I think they do. They all wrote their college entrance essays on my injury and what it was like for them. Oh. And so as they've gotten older, we've talked about, I've had the opportunity to see it through their eyes a little bit. And even though I thought I was hiding it so well from them and setting my alarm and thinking it was so confusing, they knew, in their own way, they knew. It's interesting because now we have, not only do we have more time because the kids are gone, but it's the first time I haven't been dealing with something medically in, 9 years. I had my last knee surgery this last August. And so for the first time in 9 years, I'm looking forward and saying, I don't have these health issues. As long as I manage my brain, I'm going to be okay. And so I'm getting the house cleaned up and I'm getting projects done that I've never gotten done. And my son in particular, I think with some of the things that I'm cleaning up and getting done, he's grateful for it. And I have to explain, I let some stuff go with all my pain and health issues. And I'm not saying that we live like in a really super messy house or anything.
No, I get it.
But, the cupboards that are too full of junk and the organization and, just being a little more put together and being able to do more.
I met my husband about 7.5 years ago, I think. And before then, I did not have organized cupboards. He's so organized and I'm just not. And I can't believe that he loves me despite that. Like that our differences are so great in that area. And he's just like, that's okay, whatever. I want to be organized. I like it organized. I like that he does it. So besides not having bright lights and not overstimulation, are there things that you actually do to calm yourself down?
Yes, I work probably no more than an hour and a half to 2 hours at a time without going into my room, make sure it's dark, it's quiet, and I set a timer for 20 to 30 minutes multiple times a day. Meditation has always been really hard for me, but I close my eyes. I blank myself of all the things. I don't allow myself to sit there and think about what is the grocery store list? What am I going to do when I get back to my desk?
Yeah.
I will often think about my childhood bedroom, which sounds kind of funny, but I'll remember that, think about walking through my old house or think about when the kids were little, just joyful things to really relax my brain. And it's amazing that I can do it so quickly now and hold it for 30 minutes because it used to be I couldn't even get my brain settled for at least an hour.
Yeah.
And now I can find that 20-minute break, bring my brain down, reboot it, as my doctor says, just like you would reboot a computer in the old days. Remember when we had to do that all the time? Shut the computer down, wait till it come back up. Do that with my brain.
That's awesome.
Multiple times a day.
We've never talked about how your husband handled all this.
Oh my gosh. He was my rock and still is. He went from having this partner who we did everything together to him having to handle so much more than what he did before. And that was hard, but he handled it really, really well. He's a mental health counselor for little kids. And I think he had some tools in his toolbox already to kind of deal with that. He's always been encouraging. A lot of people have a hard time in their relationships after head injury, especially if it's a closed head injury. You look normal. People have a hard time understanding, why did you put the remote control in the freezer? Like, that makes no sense. And I would would do crazy things like that for years.
Mhm.
And even now, sometimes if it's 7:00 at night, we have an agreement and I can look at him and say, I can't talk about anything serious. We can't do any planning. Like my brain is done for the day. Like I just can't do anymore.
Yeah.
And he's been super accepting of that. And a lot of spouses aren't. He's always hopeful, always encouraging. He understands head injury because of his being a mental health counselor. So I think that I'm really, really fortunate in that way as well.
My first marriage, my husband got mad at me every single day because every single day I couldn't find my keys.
Oh, mm-hmm.
And then the best part about not being married to him was not finding my keys every day and going, oh, isn't this funny? I can't find my keys. Not anybody mad at me.
And folks sometimes struggle for a long time with head injury because some of it mirrors normal aging. In my case, it was the third concussion I'd had. So I'd had one like in the first grade and I'd had one in early adulthood and then this one. So it's the compilation of those that causes more problems. But gosh, the number of women in particular from domestic violence who never get any treatment at all for head injury is shocking and scary. And I think it was Toronto did a study on homeless men and head injury. And it was like 80% of the homeless men in the Toronto area had head injury. And they just don't get the attention that they need. There's still so much about the brain that doctors don't understand. And quite often some of the symptoms are things that people brush off, again, because you look normal.
Right.
That it's hard to get the care. And I knew in my heart that something was wrong. Some of the symptoms were really strong in that first year where I'd be at an intersection and I would turn my head to the left to see who was coming. And then I would look to the center of the intersection and I would literally feel my brain still trying to catch up with where my eyes were. And I knew that wasn't right. Kind of thought it probably wasn't safe for me to be driving. But I would tell doctors and they would be like, that's weird. Well, it's classic vestibular dysfunction, right? And the number of doctors that I talked to about things like that still to this day blows my mind. And I'm not going to throw the medical system under the bus that I went to at the time because they've changed and whatnot. But I was seeing a concussion specialist in town for the first 8 months. And at the end of the 8 months, I still had a headache that I had never gotten rid of. I was starting to swim very badly in depression, which is really common with head injury. And something I haven't mentioned yet at all is I lost my voice.
Oh.
3 months after my head injury, I lost my voice and didn't have it for about 3.5 months. Had to get speech therapy to get it back. They couldn't figure out why. I'll fast forward for a second to say that what they eventually figured out, 7 years later, is that the trauma causes a disconnect with the fight or flight system. And my system was so jacked up that I lost my voice, which is a trauma response. And to this day, if I overdo and my brain gets too tired, I'll lose my voice. Now I lose it for like a day or a night or whatever, and I know how to get it back. But back then, I just kept getting worse and worse. Well, that concussion specialist, now going back, was, mystified, had never seen it before, and da-da-da-da-da. So that 8-month mark came and I was in his office and I was so sad. And I said, there's got to be something more we can do. And he looked at me and said, we've done everything we can for you. You got your voice back. And I understand you're having these issues, but you're working. And come see me if you have bronchitis. There's just nothing more I can do for you. That's what he said to me. And I went out to my car and I sat in the car and I bawled my eyes out for like 45 minutes. And I believed that there was nobody who could help me, and then I'd go through a phase where I'd be like, no, somebody has to be able to help me. So then I'd search out new doctors, and then I get somebody really interested and then they'd be like, yeah, I don't know what else to do for you. For years. That went on for years.
What kind of hope can you offer to somebody who's going through maybe not a head injury, but that can't get help and just knows in their bones that there's help out there?
You listen to that. You listen to it and you advocate for it and you don't give up. You continue to seek for help. And one of the best things that I did was I put together a document that had my history of symptoms, what had happened in my history, where I was currently. I had to nap so many times a day or, whatever it was that was really bothering me. And then I put together goals and I said, these are the things that I want to be able to overcome. And that helped a lot. It helped me get through the doctor process faster because they were able to look at it and say, I can help with this. I can help with this. I can't help with that, or you're in the wrong place completely.
Mm-hmm.
I would really encourage people to do that. You hear about it sometimes, make your list when you go to the doctor, but it's really true, particularly if you're dealing with something that you're having a hard time getting help for, writing it down and having it printed out, send it to the doctor's office in advance, because that will help you get through the system. And I think the other thing that I wish I had heard early on was that it is going to take time.
Mm-hmm.
Do
you think you would have heard it if they said it?
I think it would have depended on how it was given to me. When I did start getting to people who could help me, I wish that they had said to me repeatedly, you're not going to wake up one day in 6 weeks and suddenly feel better. This isn't going to be like the flu where you slowly get better and your life is going to be changed and you will have a new normal that will be happy and healthy, but it will look different and it's going to be okay.
Are you happy?
Yes.
How do you maintain that with everything that's happened?
I manage. I know that I have limitations. Mm-hmm. I have to pace myself. Mm-hmm. I have to manage the injury. And when I do that, then I do well.
Yeah.
But I also know that I have to live my life. And there's going to be times when I want to go to that basketball game or I want to go for the weekend trip that's, full. And I just have to plan for that. Mm-hmm. I just have to go, okay, I'm going to go to that game on Friday night. So I'm going to be really tired on Saturday. So I'm not going to plan anything on Saturday. And it's only been in the last year or so where when that Saturday comes around and I have to spend it quietly reading or just literally on the couch resting, that's okay.
Yeah.
I had that type A personality that wanted to go, do. And, producing things and getting things accomplished is what had fulfilled me before. So laying on the couch for 2 hours or 3 hours, doing literally nothing with my eyes closed, listening to the silence was extremely difficult to get used to. But now I look at it and I'm like, yep, that's what I need. And it's okay.
I remember doing a meditation where they were saying, nobody needs you. I almost started to cry. And I don't even have anybody who needs me. I just feel like I always have to be checking my email and make sure work isn't calling my name. Is my husband feeling left out because I'm laying down? It's such a weird thing. I don't even have kids at home. And I have not had a guilt-free nap in a very long time. And I don't know how to gift that to myself.
Yeah.
It's a weird thing.
It is a weird thing. And you just have to get to that place where you accept it in your heart that it's the best thing for you. And you just have to keep going and doing it. At our house, we call them my brain breaks. I'll say brain break. And if the kids are home, then they know, or my husband just knows to leave me alone. And that's what I need. But it has taken years and years, to really to accept it, to own it, to be okay with it.
I love that because, my topic of choice is self-love and loving where you're at and whatever shape you're in, this body at this moment, this brain at this moment, as smart as I am, as skinny as I am, or as heavy as I am, because life is too precious to wish something else. So I love that you're there.
It's taken a long time.
Do you think it has anything to do with you being 50 and over?
Yeah, for sure. I think there's some natural, I don't care.
I don't care what the F you think. That really helps at 50.
Yes, it does.
As I neared 50 and turned 50, I was just like, it's okay to love me.
Yeah, exactly. And I wish and hope to instill that more in my kids at younger ages.
The way to do it is what you're doing is only through your actions and loving yourself. I have discovered that I have to love myself the way I love my children.
Yes.
No matter what you look like, no matter how smart you are, no matter if your drawing is good or bad, you're just awesome. I love you. I had to get in touch with little Hara to do that.
I just love the acceptance of self. I went from the entertainment industry, which was glitzy and glamorous and amazing. And I had this big fancy title and traveling and all this great stuff. And it really defined me in a lot of ways. And I won't ever regret that because I really believe you do the best that you can at the time that, that you're living. But I do realize more now that that didn't need to define me. It was soul crushing when I realized I wouldn't be able to do that level of work anymore. Not because I lost any of my cognitive abilities. And this is an interesting thing. I had a lot of neurological testing done about 5 years after my injury when I met with the neuropsychologist and found out that from a cognitive perspective, I had lost probably nothing. And we were talking earlier about the processing speed. My processing speed was extremely fast. From a neurological cognitive standpoint, my tests were really good. What I didn't have was the capacity for length of time. And if I got tired, it drastically took down my capabilities. And so doing executive level work in that type of business where there's deadlines, every couple of hours and, high intensity and really, really energetic people running at 500 miles per hour around me constantly was just not an environment that would have been sustainable for my head injury. As it turned out, I left the business not because of the head injury, but because my job was eliminated when the company was sold. And so I was forced into leaving the industry. And I'm in an executive level position again, but it's an entirely different kind of work at an entirely different type of pace. And it allows my cognitive abilities to be used, but it paces my brain so much better. And I look back and I think, I just wish I had had somebody that could have said to me then, and maybe I wouldn't have heard it, but you don't have to be that overachieving, crazy type A personality. That doesn't have to be who you always are. Does that make sense?
Yes, totally. I love everything you said. A lot of people I interview say, I wish I had heard back then. But, you would have been like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Somebody was talking about, one thing she said was she hates unsolicited advice. And the second thing she said was she wished somebody had told her 6 years before, blah, blah, blah. But that would be unsolicited advice.
Right.
It's funny that we go back and say, I wish somebody had told me that because we weren't ready to hear it anyway.
I think there's some real truth in that. Definitely.
Also, it's a little bit of regret. How can you know what you don't know?
Exactly. How can you know what you don't know? If you know somebody who has been head injured, whether it was they fell off a ladder or they were in a car accident, to remember that head injuries are closed skull, meaning, there's not a visible break in your skull or whatever, can be very, very serious. And everybody is extremely different. And if you have a friend who's had any kind of concussion, which is a mild traumatic brain injury, you need to believe them.
Oh, is that a thing that people didn't believe you?
Oh, yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. And even some of my closest friends, because when you look normal and if you have the cognitive ability,
I see,
and I was able to get through work from a cognitive standpoint. So much of it was muscle memory that the assumption was if you can work and you're not making tons of mistakes, although looking back, I know I was making more mistakes. They were covering up for me. But generally speaking, when your cognitive ability is there, people have a tendency to believe that there's nothing wrong with you. Mm-hmm. Well, there's a whole lot of stuff that has nothing to do with cognitive abilities that can really wreak havoc on your life. And you feel like you're crazy when you have these symptoms. Like when I talked about the moving of the head through the intersection, I remember telling that to a friend and she just looked at me like, you're totally exaggerating, And I learned people don't understand it.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to tell you this embarrassing thing that I will not post. I don't think so. I'm getting pellets shot into my butt for hormones. It's a hormone replacement therapy, but it's pellets and they, with a needle or whatever, put them in your butt. And now because of that, because that's the only possible explanation, I turn the toilet seat blue when I sit on it.
Oh, no.
And so I went back to the doctor, but it was the nurse practitioner that I was talking to. But I went back to the same doctor that gives me the pellets. And I said, thinking this must be a common thing, because when I looked up, how can you possibly turn a toilet seat blue? They were talking about hormones in pregnant women. The nurse practitioner looked at me like I was crazy and then was Googling it while I was sitting there going, well, I've never heard of this. So I totally understand. Like, I'm on like the third toilet seat because it's so embarrassing. I don't know how to stop it.
Our bodies do weird, crazy things.
I'm a Smurf butt.
Yes, hey, that's okay. That's kind of fun.
Not.
Yeah, it's hard. And I think our first reaction when our friends tell us something that's going on with them is we want to fix it for them, or we want to reassure them that they're fine, or that this happens to me too. And I remember I would have conversations with people and I would literally forget what we were even talking about. It wasn't the right kind of memory loss. Like, it wasn't like, oh, I forgot where I put my shoes. This was a whole different level. And my friends would say, and I had one friend in particular who would always say, oh, we're just aging. We're just getting older. That happens to me too all the time. And I'm like, no, this is not, I'm assure you, this is not the same thing. And what you need in that moment is for somebody to just look at you and say, I'm sorry. I believe you. How can I help? And people don't say that.
I think if I've learned anything doing this podcast, that's the advice.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for that reminder. I think I have to learn it every week.
It's hard because society, we have a tendency to just want to make the hard stuff go away and make people feel better. We've been conditioned to make people feel better by saying, oh, it's okay, or you'll be okay. Especially with our close friends, that's not necessarily what they need to hear.
We say both things. We want somebody to tell us something comforting, and also just hear me and let me talk and acknowledge me. So it just depends on if it's the right advice or not. Maybe it's the right thing to say.
Yeah.
I appreciate what you're saying, though.
It's hard. Yeah.
Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of See Beneath Your Beautiful, hosted by Hara Allison. And thanks for your ratings and reviews. We'll be back next week with a new episode. Stay tuned.